Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Grace, welcoming you back to the Teach Middle East podcast. And I am delighted. Should I stop saying delighted, guys? Okay, give me another word. Drop another word in the comment, because even though I am truly delighted to have Philippa Wraithmell with me on the podcast, founder of Edruption Education, and it's Edruption Education Disruption. Bit of a tongue twister, but she is going to be talking to us about her journey from teaching to school leadership and even before that on the podcast. So back to what I was saying, help me find another word apart from delighted. Drop it in the comments or wherever you listen to this podcast. Philippa, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure, actually. Ooh, that's another word I need to find a synonym for.
My pleasure.
It's my pleasure because it is my
This should
pleasure.
be your thing. The
I,
words, this should be you.
you know what? I only have people on the podcast who I'm delighted to have and who with whom it's a pleasure to speak. So let's just lay
Oh,
that out there as a fact. Philippa,
thank
how
you.
are you?
I'm good. I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, I've had a lovely day. It's been one of the more relaxing days that since opening Edruption. But yeah, no, a good day to have.
Brilliant. And your Philippa, like me, is a mom to boys. So the boys are at school, so I know her head is in a
Yeah.
good space, the way mine is right now in my office. Um, let's go back to the beginning. I love to ask this question. Where are you from? Where did it start? Where did you grow up?
I am from Nottingham in the UK, from a part of Nottingham called Carlton, which my husband would say is the wrong side of the river, because he was from the other side of the river in Nottingham, which is the posh bit. And my parents both, well, not both, my mum was from Middlesbrough, but my dad grew up in Nottingham as well. And so it was just where we kind of were. I lived in the same house for 19, 20 years, didn't move, desperately wanted to travel, wanted to go all over the place, and we didn't really have those opportunities necessarily. So yeah, just Nottingham girl, born and bred, went on holiday to the Lake District every year and came back.
Brilliant. And how would you describe your childhood?
um Lots of it was playing in the garden. We were really lucky. My dad was a vicar, so he had a vicarage and it had an acre of land with it where he was very handy. I often tell my children about our three-story tree house, which was built out of things like pallets, but it had like a little underground bit that you could climb up the tree. But yeah, so he was very sort of, good with DIY and making things and building things. So we had rope bridges and things like that in the garden. So it was very outdoorsy, very, rurally kind of not necessarily out on the streets playing. It was more kind of in the garden. It was all about my mum and dad were very much like you play here, you don't kind of go and hang out on the streets and things like that, which obviously as a teenager I was like desperate to go and do, be cool with all my friends. But yeah, so quite quiet really. My mum was a teacher for part of my childhood, for a large part of my childhood. She's got lots of mental health issues. So my mum has had a mental breakdown, had a nervous breakdown when I was about 5, which probably had a huge impact on who I am now as a mother as well. So I was mainly brought up by my dad, and we'd have rainbow coloured shorts that we would wear, both of us, with pink shoes. It was very cool. So it's very influenced by him, and I was proper daddy's girl. But yeah, so I grew up in Nottingham, very cozily in a house there.
Daughter of a vicar. Like I can't even imagine what that's like. Was it one of those upbringings where you rebelled against it, or did you fall in line with being the daughter of the vicar?
That's really interesting. Because normally people say, "Oh, vicar's daughter," because of the rebellious nature, I guess. And I probably was a bit of both. I did do the altar service for a while, probably because of how much I just loved spending time with my dad. But he was really open-minded. One of the things that I've always really appreciated about the way that he brought me up and my brothers up was everybody was somebody to care for, everybody, regardless of religion, ethnicity, where you were, like everybody, no matter who you were, who came to the door, he would invite you in, he would, give clothes, food, help, support. It didn't matter. And that kind of really showed me. I remember going to Thailand when I finally did go traveling when I was older, and I came back and I was like, oh my God, I want to be Buddhist. And he was like, oh my goodness, it's my second favorite religion. And when you're kind of there as a child, you're like, no, you're meant to be like really annoyed with me. And he was so excited about this idea that I'd seen other cultures and other things, and he was just so ready to embrace everything. And so I was very much brought up in a place where as long as you were happy, it didn't matter, and that was the most important thing. So as long as you were happy and kind, then you were good. And so that was really nice. And then I think obviously as a teenager, yes, definitely very rebellious, definitely lots of things that I definitely don't want my children to do, but I'm sure they will. But yeah, probably not so much because of the upbringing of my like the religion side of it, more for other reasons.
Oh, okay, brilliant. So then you grew up in Nottingham. When did you leave? And what made you leave?
What made me leave? Lots of things. Again, like I say, like I just always wanted to travel. My biggest thing in the whole world was I wanted to fill my passport with stamps. Like I just didn't understand why anybody would want to live in the same place for the whole of their lives. It just made no sense to me at all. And I've got two older brothers who one lives literally a mile away from where we used to live. The other one lives in the same city. And they just had no interest in going anywhere or doing anything. It just really baffled me. There was so much to see in the world. So almost as soon as I possibly could, I went to Sheffield Hallam for a year, realised it wasn't quite the right university for me. Then I went off and did lots of internships in London, because at the time I was doing fashion marketing. And then I actually came back to Nottingham to finish my degree, but didn't live at home. I lived in the city. And then really found myself actually more not stuck there, but just for reasons, lots of different reasons. I did go traveling, but I just ended up kind of finding a school that I loved, that I worked at there. So I did fashion marketing. Used to commute to Birmingham every day, working for Claire's Accessories as an international buyer, and then became a teacher and was working at a school not far from where I used to live with children that were in a very different upbringing to what I had. And that just seemed for me like really purposeful. And then not long after that, I had my first son. So it kind of, think in some ways tied me there, but in other ways also then made me kind of go, what's next and what's possible, and how can I experience the world in a way that's sort of safe and structured whilst I've got a child.
Yeah. So from fashion to education, why
Yeah.
and how?
So I guess part of it was probably the commute. Wasn't happy about that. But also, when I first started to do buying, there was the recession. It was in 2007, 2008. And all of a sudden, all of the trips that were part of why this job was going to be so exciting, it just disappeared. And that wasn't something people were doing anymore. And so all the opportunities for my level and for the levels just above, so I would have had to have several promotions before I would have even been considered to go on a trip out to the Far East or to wherever. And I kind of thought, I just don't want to be stuck in an office. But I love fashion. I'm just so passionate about it, and love creating things and drawing and designing. And so I was talking to somebody and they were like, but you can teach fashion. And I was like, what? So as soon as I found that out, I started inquiring about it, worked out what I needed to do, went back to university, did my PGCE, and then basically went into design technology, but led kind of fashion, textiles, ended up teaching an awful lot of food and nutrition, and leading departments and heading up departments for design technology in Nottingham. So yeah, that's how.
Wow. Are you guys following, listeners? We're talking to someone who's done fashion, design technology, food tech, and now ped tech, ed tech. Like, how did you make the transition from, because there's a lot of transitions going on here, Philippa. How did you transition from teaching design technology to becoming an ed tech lead?
Well, in my sense, it was quite of a natural progression. When you teach design technology, you have to teach everything. You have to teach resistant materials, textiles, food, like everything, metalwork, everything. I mean, I could build you a brick wall if you needed me to. Like that's how much you would like end up having to teach. You know, construction was something that I oversaw, so understanding it was just what you had to do. I've got an engineering diploma because of the fact that I taught BTEC up to A level for engineering. All of those things are things that you just had to learn because it's so multidisciplinary. And when I moved over here, I think I expected there to be, in the same way that there is in the UK, a real big emphasis on, or not, it's not as big in the UK anymore, but a real big emphasis on design technology and about physical skills, and that these kind of hands-on technology skills that are based around construction, design, engineering, all those things would be really, really big here as well. And actually it wasn't. There's only a few schools that have even got design technology departments in them. Those children that go to them are incredibly lucky because it's a fantastic subject. Anyway, and when I came to Repton, Abu Dhabi, I was going to be a class teacher. And the reason that I was happy to do that was because, again, one of the things that when we came out here, realized really quickly that to be able to sustain a life out here, I had to be a teacher who worked in a school that my children could go to. And I couldn't work for a school that I just loved passionately because the children needed me there. It was different, and I needed to think about my own children as well. So I started working there, and it was, well, we haven't got a secondary school yet. We are thinking about it. We're planning it. We're opening it. We do want design technology, but we haven't got it yet. Will you be a class teacher? So I sort of set my head into, okay, one, primary school, scary, but two, having to know everything in the world, not even just like, you know, transitioning from design technology to ed tech, actually just transitioning to being a geography teacher, a history teacher, a math teacher, an English teacher, every single thing in the world, right? I mean, primary school teachers are incredible to have all that knowledge and wealth of knowledge. It's amazing. And then to change year groups every so often as well is just, you know. So, and he ended up being called in by the principal at the time and said, we need someone to do computer science. Do you fancy doing it? We've decided it's going to be a standalone subject and it's going to be teaching all the children. So you'd be like a specialist subject again. It's really closely related to STEAM, which is something that I'd done before and I'd held conferences in the UK for. And so that sort of didn't seem so scary. And then they kind of added on the fact that I'd also be rolling out all the devices for the Apple Distinguished Schools program, training all the teachers and doing all the other things. And then it slowly became more and more, but almost in a very scaffolded, manageable way for me, who'd already had to constantly be shifting direction from different subjects to different subjects. I mean, you could go through a day and you teach 6 back-to-back subjects, they could all be totally different. So going to then teaching computing, computer science, coding curriculums, etc., it wasn't a million miles away from doing electronics or anything else in secondary school. So for me, was that huge part of it, but it was also understanding and being empowered by what technology can do for children. And I just see such an array of skills and support and personalization that it's really hard when you believe in something not to just get into it and just be engaged and be really passionate about it. And I think when you can see the difference it makes to children's lives and even my own life, like the things that I use technology for, it's really hard not to think, yeah, I can just get on with it. I'll read that book for that night, or I'll get through that project and I'll do that and I'll learn that to be able to train people because it's really important. I'm a big believer in kind of making sure everybody understands why. And I think with technology, people have to understand why and they have to see those tangible links. And so it didn't feel hard. It didn't feel like a difficult transition. It felt quite normal in terms of the progression that had probably already been through.
Yeah, I can see now how there could be threads there that link, the subjects together. Back up. Why did you choose the Middle East?
It was a bit of potluck. We applied, my husband and I decided on the morning that we woke up and found out that Brexit was official. I applied for 50 jobs just all over the world and just kind of went, where shall we go? Middle East was somewhere that we'd always looked at before because it had opportunities for him to work as well. He hasn't got a degree, but he has his own business. And so like we needed somewhere obviously that would be suitable for both of us, suitable to bring up the children. We had 2 children at that point, and to make sure that we were able to kind of, it was quite nice to be able to be in a place that we could still travel, we could see lots of places, it was safe, just lots of reasons, but also ultimately there was a job and it was exciting.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was like me, I just kind of went, I just need to get out. But I got out years before Brexit. I even tried to like vote in proxy for Brexit not to happen. Still happened. So guess I didn't do anything there. Was not successful.
No.
Talk to me about the the movement between going from, helping Repton Abu Dhabi to become an Apple Distinguished School to then really fully diving into the digital learning space. What was that journey like?
um I don't know. Again, it felt like quite a whirlwind, really, at Repton. I felt like I picked up so many skills and so many different leadership elements and entities because, like I say, I went from being a class teacher to then delivering CPD, which until I got to Repton, I'd never done whole school CPD ever. I'd done small groups, I'd done departmental, but I'd never led a whole school CPD. So that for me was like a whole transition in itself. And I remember standing there and thinking, nobody knows this is the first time you've done it. So just pretend it's not. Just do it, and it'll be fine. And worst case scenario, you look what you did and you do it again better next time. And that was kind of how I did everything. And then I found that as I was doing it, I was like, there were things that weren't in place. So we were trying to build out these morals and these like different elements to the digital strategy, and there weren't elements in place that needed to be there. So for instance, safeguarding, or links back to behaviour policies if a child did something wrong. All of those kind of fundamental things that lots of schools do now as just part and parcel of a digital strategy were not there. And it was really important for me to make sure they were, so that everybody was involved and everybody took ownership of the strategy. So then when I had an opportunity to move to another school to kind of take them from not being any technical device, really, they had secondary schools, Cranley in Abu Dhabi, secondary school were BYOD, but it wasn't necessarily specific. They could kind of bring whatever they wanted, really. Majority brought Apple devices, so that was quite easy to transition to streamline them. But the primary school just had a couple of trolleys of devices. So the big challenge was going, okay, how do we get them to be a one-to-one device school in a really meaningful way where everyone's bought into it, it's developed into the curriculum, and it actually is useful and is extending students' ability to learn and integrate. And probably quite helpfully with COVID in terms of digital skills, it really boosted it along. And I think it pushed that generally probably a year or so ahead of where it could have been, because it could have taken quite a long time. I mean, change is never easy. The school was quite new in terms of setup anyway. So then to be changing a huge element like that already was quite a difficult thing to be doing. But that again let me kind of solidify a lot of the things that I'd learned, but also see them in a different perspective, see them from different people's views, see them from not as a startup. Like I started Repton at the Fry campus, and we were the first people there. We were the founding team for that campus. And it's a lot easier to set things in motion that in that instance than it is to go into a school and be like, hey, I'm going to change everything, but it's fine. Because no one likes that. And so you learn a lot of skills and you do a lot of things that way. And so basically it kind of solidified a lot of the foundations that I'd learned already. And that's where I then wrote the book, because for me, it was during COVID when I was going through that. I'd done it before, I'd experienced it, and people were asking me questions about it. I just felt like I didn't have the capacity to keep answering the same questions. And so that was when it was kind of built into the idea that, well, if I do this, then at least people can have like almost like a handbook that they can take away, and they can kind of see those different areas of a strategy and then implement their own and see what that looks like for them. Because again, no school strategy for digital learning should be the same, because every school is so different. And so I kind of got to that point really. And that's where then from there, it evolved into me going and working for the government and going and working as a subject matter expert and going and working for different companies for EdTech, and just sort of started to broaden things. And lots of times when you kind of go, people are going to turn around to me and go, you haven't got a clue what you're talking about at some point. And because you have that kind of imposter syndrome. But yeah, so I just kind of slowly built it up. And whenever you hear those little niggling thoughts, I tend to go for a run or try and shake it out. And sometimes it can take a few days for you to kind of feel like you're back on track and you've got that confidence to keep doing what you're doing. But yeah, so it's been a lot of learning and a lot of development over time, and lots of working with lots of different people. And yeah, hopefully now I get to share that with multiple people.
You
Millions.
will. You will. It's weird. As I listen to you talk, I feel like I've watched you come into yourself. It's weird. It's like I'm going back to, like, I can't remember if it was 2019 or 2018, the leadership conference, watching you
Yeah.
like present for the
Oh,
first time, and like
and the lights
watching.
went off.
Oh, don't let's not talk about the electricity. And you know how you trooped through that, and then watching you write the book, and I feel that is how I feel. I feel like I've watched you come into your own. Talk to me about writing that book. What was your process like? How long did it take you? A lot of teachers want to write books, so I think it's good to hear from someone who's done it.
Yeah. I think I drew on a lot of my experience in terms of what I'd been doing. So that was absolutely like the framework of it. And I remember writing to John Cat Education because I thought, well, I'm not going to write it if no one's going to do anything with it, because I can't self-publish it. No one will buy it. Not worth it. So I wrote to them on the off chance that they might be interested, filled out a document, and I got the document and it was like, what's your book going to be about? And I was like, technology. And I had to kind of start to think about what that meant. And so that was when I broke it down. And that's when I came up with the analogy of like the digital ecosystem, about it being this foundation for learning. And even calling it the digital ecosystem, I told people, I was like, oh, it's going to be called the digital ecosystem. And everyone was like, what do you mean, a digital ecosystem? That's absolutely ridiculous. And now all I hear, not saying I coined it in the slightest, however, lots and lots of edtech companies now talk about their ecosystem, Microsoft's ecosystem, Apple's ecosystem, and all this. And it must have been somewhere that I kind of had picked it up and thought about it. But for me, it absolutely makes sense. It's this place where there's a buzz of learning and people are creating and developing and growing and iterating and all the rest of it. And so I went through, and I think for me, EdTech, as a lot of schools still, is a standalone sidecar to day-to-day business. So how do you get an education strategy to be recognised by educationalists as you build it into frameworks that are already there? So I basically kind of went, okay, well, what do schools already do? Because if we talk to schools about what we already do, like governance and policies, tick, we already do that. Oh, okay, we need a policy for that. Okay, got that. Understand that. Okay, curriculum. Yeah, we all have curriculum. Okay, we can blend that. Okay, get it. Right, so curriculum becomes one. Safeguarding, humongous area. Oh, yeah, we do that. Oh, okay, we have to digitally safeguard. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. And so it almost became like how can I get the really hard to reach people by saying to them, this is not ed tech, this is learning. It's not ed tech, this is safeguarding. Because until you say it in that way, people just assume it's another thing they've got to add. And it isn't. It's just the way that you've got to blend it into what you're already doing and acknowledge the growth of the world, because it's changed. You know, as soon as someone brings in devices into a school, it doesn't matter what they are, you have to have a thought process around that. Otherwise, you are going against safeguarding procedures. You are putting children at risk. You're allowing learning to not be focused and to be distracting if there's no curriculum agenda behind it that drives pedagogy. If you don't have governance, who's to say your staff aren't off just watching Netflix all day, every day, or, you know, whilst they're meant to be teaching? Those things like that, like, you know, those are the things that are going to build the framework. And that's what builds schools into being positive digital schools, where they can, you know, stand there and stand tall and proud and say, we do tech well because this is built into our learning, it's built into our ethos, it's built into our vision. And so the book had to be based around things that every educator thinks of as just, of course it's education, of course it's what we do, instead of an add-on. So that's kind of where I started it. And then in terms of writing it, it was calling upon people like yourself, but it was also calling upon other educators who'd had experience bringing in different technologies that can support, technologies that can also bridge that gap between parents and teachers and schools, in saying, actually, this is what we do, and we do it because it's for education. and it's about communication. And so I sort of threaded in a range of different areas and elements, including things like tech infrastructure and leaders from that side as well. It's a whole piece that lots of people have to get involved with. It's accessibility, it's everything. There's no kind of strand that someone in your school can say, oh, that's nothing to do with me, because actually it's to do with everybody. So tried to get some case studies from that, which obviously helped in terms of me not having to write, the full 200 pages. And then it was my thought process around it and things and experiences that I'd had, and then offering kind of examples and support and questions around how someone else could do it. And again, kind of reiterating that idea that it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be the same as the school next door to you, because you don't have the same children, you don't have the same teachers, you might not even have the same funding. And that's okay, as long as you don't try and emulate something that you are ever going to be able to achieve. So it's about looking at your vision and values, and I think that's really important. So it probably took less time than it might have done if I'd had to go out and do lots and lots and lots of research, because I kind of had already done that from talking to people. But I did sit and talk to people all over the world who were governors in schools, who were leaders, who were heads of multi-academy trust associations, both for independent and private and the public sector, across the board, because I wanted to have that real balance and showing those different elements and sides of it as well. But a lot of it was from my experience with working in schools.
Yeah. How has writing the book changed you professionally?
That's an interesting question. For about 2 years, I probably didn't even really talk about having written it. So I guess probably part of imposter syndrome of just like, oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, it's there, kind of like not really thinking about it. But I mean, I use it as a bit of a guide for myself. Sometimes I go to it and think, what else do I need to do? What did I have to add to that, etc. I don't know, professionally, I think in some ways, I guess it probably has made people ask me for questions or support or advice and guidance because I've written a book perhaps they wouldn't have before. I'm not sure whether they've read the book, whether that made any difference, but it definitely has kind of, I guess, elevated where I am. But I don't think that's necessarily why I wrote it. I wrote it because I also, as a dyslexic child, I struggled massively at school, hugely, and there were very low expectations of where I would be. And so I think it was also a bit of a point to prove of kind of like, I can write a book, why not? And so professionally, to kind of take myself from the first blog I ever wrote that was published in like a UAE teacher magazine out here, to going to writing a whole book that's published globally and is bought globally, was incredible. But yeah, I think I definitely was kind of a little journey of like my childhood self kind of going, can do that. Don't tell me I can't do that.
Would you encourage teachers to write books?
If they are absolutely passionate and dedicated to whatever it is. I think if they're not, I guess it goes to the why, doesn't it? Why are you writing it? I was writing it because fundamentally I could see there was a gap, and I wanted to help people as well who were reaching out to me, and it felt like a great way to consolidate it. I know lots of other educators feel a really similar way. They feel really passionately about a specific area of education that they don't feel is getting enough attention, because obviously there are so many different things happening. And I think if you've got that passion and drive, then yes. If you're not really sure why you're doing it, and it's just for like my secondary reason, which is to kind of promote the little girl inside of, I wrote a book, probably not. Maybe write a different sort of book.
I wouldn't encourage someone to write a book because they think they're going to make money or they're going to get some sort of
Oh
fame and
God, no.
notoriety.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, in fact, definitely not for the money, because yeah, if it was counted in like how much I would earn if I was just teaching, I probably haven't even made a month's salary yet. So I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, no, I think we need to set the record straight, because some people do have in their minds, people written a book, they must have made bag from that.
Oh yeah. And I think some people do, absolutely. And there's definitely, like Kate Jones, I'm sure, with the amount of books she's got and the things that come off the back of that, quite possibly is getting something out of it more than I am. Definitely getting more than I am out of it. Most people are. But I think it depends. It really depends. I think if you have brought out probably more than two or three, it's probably been worth it. But yeah, no, I don't think you're going to make millions out of writing a book. I think any author will tell you that.
You keep referring to imposter syndrome. Today I wrote in my newsletter that balance between humility and pride. What what is it that causes you to feel as if you're an imposter? And how do you recognize that feeling?
I think initially, so I remember going into the principal at Repton's, the previous principal.
Hey, Gillian.
His No, not Gillian. Actually, it was Rob. It was
Oh,
pre-Gillian. Although she was always really good at telling me off if I ever could. She could see it coming, and she'd be like, "Stop it." That no, Rob, and because I said because he wanted me to do a conference and speak. It was like a Spark event, and it was like 5 minutes. I didn't have to talk for very long at all. I was petrified, and he literally stood there, and he was just like, "What is it that you don't understand?" And I was like, I don't know why you'd want me to do it. He was like, you're leading technology for this whole school. You've just taken us through the Apple Distinguished School status. You speak to teachers every single day. They come to you and ask for advice. And you don't think you can stand up there for 5 minutes and talk to people about what you do. And I was like, well, no. And he was like, he was the first person to ever say to me, you have imposter syndrome. And I just remember thinking, I don't really know what that is. And literally he sat there and he explained it to me. And he was basically like, you look up to so many people around you that you don't ever think that you can be the person that people look up to. And so, and that's, I guess, a good thing. I think I meet so many people and they're incredible, like wonderful, beautiful, inspiring people. And you kind of think, God, like no one is ever going to look at me and think anything like that. Why would they? Because it's you're just the person that you are. And I don't know, maybe some people do kind of walk around with this really big head and think, oh yeah, people are going to want to come and listen to me. I'm great. I don't. Like I had a coffee morning the other day and I was so scared that nobody would come. Even though I knew two of the people who were coming from the school. And their teacher told me that they had to go because it's in their school, not that they had to go, but he was like, they'll definitely be there. But I was stood there thinking no one's going to come because why would they want to give up their morning to come and drink coffee and tea with me? And so you constantly kind of think that you're not one of those people that's able to do that and impart that knowledge and that information. But I think, like I said before about the CPD, standing there and going, what's the worst that could happen? And I think that's what I always tell myself is does it matter? Who cares? Like, so you'll get back up, you'll dust yourself off and you'll go again. And that for me is the biggest part of it. And I think I do question myself a lot. I'm very aware. Shout out to Dr. Helen Wright, who's amazing. Who was my
two
coach for a
deuces for
long time
Dr.
and is
Helen.
just incredible. Like a massive amount of it is to do with the way that my education and my experience at school happened, but also being the third of three children and you know what happens to the third child, they just get on with it, right? And so never quite having that champion and never having people to necessarily acknowledge when you are doing things really well. And I didn't find out I was dyslexic until I was at university, so I constantly was told, read what's on the page, not what you think is there. Stop, like that's not what it says, you can't read that properly. Standing up and doing my times tables and being screamed at across the room because I couldn't recite my times tables to sit back down again, and then just having this horrible fear of going to school. So I think another reason that I went into education so quickly was because for me it was an opportunity to change that narrative for people. But when you've constantly had that, you question it, you question who you are, and you question why anyone would want to stand there and listen to you.
I get that. I it's it's hard to listen to someone that I think is bloody brilliant say something like what you just said, because I've just, like I said earlier in the podcast, I've watched you come into your own. And
Mm,
there are a lot of women, you're not alone, who are, they're hesitant to step up and to put themselves forward.
mm,
And it's sad because they're so talented. Every single time I do a conference or a seminar, workshop, or webinar, anything, I have to spend, I don't know, sometimes an hour on a Zoom with somebody because I might have invited them because I see that, oh my God, this
yeah.
person is like really good. And they're like, me? And I'm like, yes, you.
Yeah,
And then I have to be like on the Zoom for like an hour going, you can do it.
yeah.
See that person over there? They did it. They were afraid, this other person, that other person.
Mm,
Because I'm like, listen, and I use myself an example. I'm like, if I can stand in front of governments and leaders and
mm,
heads of schools and all sorts of people I never thought I'd be talking to with my half Jamaican, half London mash-up accent, I'm sure you can do it. Like
yeah.
it is not beyond you, because I had to get over that
No.
myself. I had to get over
Yeah.
everything. I had to get over my background, my ethnicity,
Mm,
my gender, everything, to say,
yeah.
you know what, Lisa, why not? Like, why
You
would
do.
you be the one to do it? Like, why not? Not in a
Mm.
prideful way, but in a way to say,
No,
but why not?
because you're right, because it's empowering others as well. And I think to go back to something you mentioned right at the beginning, we're both mums of boys. Like for me, having a mum who is getting up every day, exercising, playing, spending time with them, getting them to school, talking to them about the right things, but also having a career where I want them to be proud of me, but I want them to see that this is what women do. They can do anything. Like I was always told that by my dad, like you can do anything. Um, and that's what drives me. I remember writing an article actually about it. You said you were going to make me cry. you I wrote an
Do you
article
want to grab some
about
tissue? I can pause for you.
no, it's fine. Yeah, I remember writing an article about my driving force. And they every time I think, oh, I can't be bothered, or God, do I really have to do this again? Or this hasn't worked, what am I going to do? I just look at them and think, you've
You
just
can
got to
make me
carry
cry.
on. Yeah, you do though. Like for me, having a mum who, and I could have been not saying that I have to be in the workforce at all, but I had to be a mum who was present. I had to be a mum who was there. I had to be strong and I had to be able to support them no matter what. And I have to have conversations with my 13-year-old now that hurt inside, because you have to have those horrible, difficult conversations. Unfortunately, I hear a lot of people talk about their kids being like their best friends. I love my children, but I'm their mum and I have to have difficult conversations with them and I have to step up. And all the things that I do in my work and everything else all rotate around the idea that I'm stepping up because I'm their mum. Like ultimately, nothing else matters to me. And that's what gets me through imposter syndrome. That and the incredible people like yourself, like Helen, like people around me. I've got an amazing husband who's constantly championing me and asking me why I question myself and trying to get to the root of it. But ultimately, they're my driving force because that's so important to me. But it took somebody 6 years ago, more than that, 8 years ago now, saying to me, you've got imposter syndrome, for me to even begin to recognize it. And I think that's really important, is people have to be aware and not use it as a crutch. Oh, I've got imposter syndrome, so I can't do that. It's very much like, it's not, I've got to get out of this mindset. I've got to move forwards. I've got to push past that barrier, because it's the difficult things that make us stronger. It's the difficult times in our lives that get us to the next bit and through the next hard time and through, because life isn't always a bed of roses and we just have to keep going. But yeah, ultimately they are the people that get me through it.
Yeah, for sure. And like this weekend, I took my boys away, and we went away because my husband wasn't in the country. Well, he still isn't. Maybe by the time this podcast comes out in June, he should be
We might be
back.
back.
He should be back because he's gone for work. And I was, I had like normally when I have weeks like I had last week, I would sit with him and he would, try to cheer me up or take me out and stuff, but he wasn't here. So obviously I took the boys out instead. And I just marveled at how mature they are and how much they understood. It's weird because I
Mm,
started to tell them things in baby type things, and now they're 12 this year, but they're like, Mom,
yeah.
seriously, we saw like this happen. We know what's going on. Like
Mm,
they're very, very aware. And I said to myself, it is the impetus that I need to keep pushing because they're watching. Like they're very aware
mm,
of my ups and downs, and they're very aware of what's going on around them,
mm.
and we owe it to them to be our true
Yeah.
authentic selves and to show up,
100%.
you
Yeah.
know, how we
Yeah.
are. Let's move on to more happy topics because now that we've had our cry, a mommy cry, let's talk about. So you, well, hopefully, hopefully it will be a happier topic. I think it is.
I
You
hope
you took the leap, right? The
so.
leap that I think a lot of educators who have been in the profession for a while, they want to take that leap. They want to go independent. They want to do something else. Some may want to remain in education, others may want to go completely left and do something different.
Mm.
What made you think this was the time to take your shot?
I guess in some ways it goes back to my children. My son's going to boarding school in the UK in September, and it was never on our roadmap. And we sort of started talking about it about 18 months ago, and I'm absolutely heartbroken about the fact that he, wants to go, but I know it's the right thing for him. He's got a scholarship, it's, excellent. So my selfish mum brain, I was like, I don't want to miss the weekend events. I don't want to miss dropping him off in September. I don't want to miss all these things. And that was my push point, because for years before, people have said to me, you should go and you should do it on your own. You should do it. And I've always had that lack of confidence of, I can't do it. No one will employ me. No one will want to speak to me. No one will want me to do that. Or they might, they might take me on for a bit and then then that'll be it. And then I'll be floundering in the water. And I think with the progression of my experience and understanding, and more people requesting and asking for support, and even things like so lovely when people email and ask if you'll be a keynote speaker or do this, that, and the other. And obviously when you're tied to a school, you can't do things like that. And here anyway, I know in different countries it's different. And wanting to support more, like when I was during COVID, I had the opportunity through Cranley to support hundreds of educators across Abu Dhabi. And myself and the team there, the IT team, we down tools and we got on with it because they needed our help. And it just reminded me of the education system that I'd come from in Nottingham when I was working in those schools, and I was leading those departments of children who really needed the help and people who needed the help and support. And for me, Edruption is all about empowering change. It's about the development of systems. It's about structure. It's about making sure that people have the capacity to be able to do it on their own. I think I referenced something the other day about give a man a fish. Do you remember that? There was an advert and like
Yeah.
always used to go on the TV when I was little. Give a man a fish and he can eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and give him the tools to fish and he'll be able to fish forever. And that's not quite the same, but you know what I mean. And that for me is what Edruption is about. It's about empowering that change and supporting people to get to that point where they can have the capacity, and they do have the capacity to be doing all of those digital systems right, to be able to make sure that they are empowering the future of education and changing it, and not just stagnating and assuming that it'll all be all right in the end. And so it felt like the right moment in education, influx of AI, lots of different things happening, lots of people requesting support. And then with the ultimate kind of personal side of it as well, of me wanting flexibility, I want to be able to work with people all over the world so that I can go and work in London for a week and then drive to his school and take him out for dinner. And as silly as that seems and ridiculous, that's what I want to have. I want to be able to do it all. I want to work with as many people as I possibly can. I want to grow the business's capacity to be able to have more people working for me who can also help support that, and not necessarily just technology, about education generally, empowering change, empowering and supporting education institutes to just continue to be better and to support children to have the best education possible. And that goes from schools that can't afford it all the way through to schools that absolutely can and more. And I think that's where I want to be able to be. And I got to a point where I was like, I can do more. I have more capacity. My brain works at 1,000,000 miles an hour with different things that I want to be able to achieve. And I can't achieve it unless I'm doing this on my own. And so that's why I took the leap. But it's very scary and I constantly question it. So unless you're very resilient and you have a good support network, I would also say be careful.
What are the scary bits? What scares you so that people are aware of roadblocks?
Yeah, I guess it was going, and it's interesting because we were talking about this before, but going from being like just an educator who someone's hired you and it's your job day to day, to going to kind of having to get someone to buy into you and want to understand why they would need your services and why they would need your help. You know, and ultimately kind of marketing that and getting people to understand why, that you are there to help and you're not just a crook trying to sell them, you know, golden eggs. You're actually there because you really want to help and you want to make a difference and you want to support communities. And yeah, I think the whole salesy side of it, like I've had a few edtech companies talk to me about whether I'd want to go with them and be the education on the side. And I'm always very specific about who I work with and like who I support as education like platforms, because I do think in the past a lot of ed tech platforms haven't necessarily been that educationally driven, and I just always want people to be looking out and seeing to make sure that they're doing the right thing and choosing the right path. So I'm a bit dubious of that, and I also don't like the idea that I'd be there as like a hook to sell something. But then ultimately what you do as a consultant is you sell. And what you were saying is that, you know, in education, you sell yourself every day to the children to kind of get them to buy into the knowledge that they're trying to give them. And that's a really nice way of thinking about it. But I think that's the scary bit for me is having to push somebody to understand, like, and actually kind of driving that. And then ultimately, I guess, what happens if they turn around and say no, and then you've got no work? That's quite scary.
No, they say no, but then you say some will, some won't. So what? Who's
Exactly.
next?
Absolutely.
So I'm putting you on the spot before we wrap up the podcast. What
Okay.
do you offer at Edruption? Many schools listen to the Teach Middle East podcast. What are your services? See if you can do a little bit of marketing, Philippa.
Oh, there you go. Well, the most popular thing at the moment is my parent workshops. So I'm actually currently having them registered by Ofcom so that they will be UK accredited, which is incredible. But parent digital bridge workshops, which is about understanding how we can support as a triangle of parent, teacher, and child, understanding how to grow digital natives. So that's a big workshop that I do for schools. I also do vision leadership workshops to look at values and vision driving technology that's going into your schools. So that's either pre or post implementation of devices, whatever that may be. I do a big project, which is going to be a 12-month project, which I'm actually looking for schools, especially in Abu Dhabi, because there may be changes coming into Abu Dhabi in the next few months. That I'm sure lots of principals will be aware of already. But it's basically, I'm calling it the digital cluster, which is the idea that every month you basically sign up to 12 months, and by the end of it, you will have everything you need to have a strong and strategic digital strategy that will help you to align your technology and your values within your school and what you need to do for the next 5 years to be able to help support and build capacity. So that's a big thing. And that's all about digital governance, safeguarding, curriculum, like the whole shebang. Training for teachers. Just became a Microsoft partner, which is very exciting. So we are now an official global training partner, which means that if you're a Microsoft school, we can help do all the integration and implementation there. Yeah, I mean, lots and lots of things. I do digital mentoring for new leadership. I go in and do some gap analysis. I do a digital deep dive audit, and there's an option of just a really short one, which is a week, or I can do one that takes a whole month. Where we look at everything and we interview all your stakeholders and we do a big analysis and see how prepared you are for academic excellence and rigor with using digital learning and technology.
Superb.
Yeah, quite a
See,
bit.
that wasn't so hard, was it? If anyone wants to get in touch with Philippa, I will drop her link and her website in the show notes. So feel free to reach out. But it wasn't so bad, was it, Philippa?
Not at all. Thank you so much for having me.
You are most welcome. Thank you for being my guest on the Teach Middle East podcast.